My name is Sarah Shepard. Today is September the 5th, 2014, and it is my distinct privilege on behalf of the Knoxville Bar Association's Legal History Project to interview the Honorable Charles D. Susano, Jr., presiding judge of the Tennessee Court of Appeals. Judge, let's start at the beginning. Tell us your full name and your date of birth.
Charles Daniel Susano, Jr., born in Knoxville, Tennessee on March 24, 1936.
Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Knoxville. Lived basically my whole life in Knoxville.
And where did you go to high school?
Went to high school at Knoxville Catholic High School. Graduated from there in 1954.
And I understand after that you left a town with a perfectly good university to go to some other school.
Well, that's true. As a Catholic boy, I was always interested in the University of Notre Dame, and it's the only school I applied to and got accepted and graduated in 1958.
Based on photos on your walls, the big banner on your door, and other memorabilia, it appears that the Fighting Irish are special to you. In fact, you've been described as a rabid Fighting Irish fan. Any truth to that?
It's completely true. My first remembrance of the University of Notre Dame was in 1946. This was after the war, and all the football players came back, and many of them were 24 and 25 years old, and there was a classic game, Army-Notre Dame, and the game ended in a 0-0 tie. And I remember where I was when I heard that, and I fell in love with Notre Dame, and had a great time there, and would love to go back, but my wife has no interest in living in South Bend, Indiana.
I can understand that.
I can too.
And what degree did you receive?
Well, you know, it's an interesting name. It's a Bachelor of Philosophy in Commerce. What that means is I majored in accounting and minored in philosophy. But I have a PhD, not PhD, but a PhD. So,
What did you do after you left college?
my first job was with an accounting firm in New York City, which was Tush, Niven, Bailey, and Smart. I think the Tush name continues to this day in one of the big firms. But I did pretty well in college, and so I was interviewed for this by this firm, and they asked me where I wanted to go. And I said, well, I don't care. They said, we have offices everywhere. I said, well, I don't care, just wherever. And the guy said, what about New York City? I said, well, I've never been to New York City, so we'll try New York City. I went there and was totally and completely miserable.
What was so miserable about
Well, I lived at 97th and Madison, and I had a one bedroom and shared a bath and shared a kitchen with another, and I didn't know anybody, and I'd shower in the morning, I'd get on the subway, and by the time I got down to the office, I was completely drenched, and I said, this is no way to live. So I had to figure out some way to get out of New York. That was my goal, and I couldn't face my dad and tell him I'd made this terrible mistake, so I had to figure out some way to get out gracefully. Well, I was 1A, and I was encouraged by the people to join a reserve unit in Long Island. Well, that meant I'd stay in New York, so I didn't want to do that. So I sat there and got drafted, and then I went in and said, I'm sorry, but I've been drafted. I'll have to leave. Glory be to God. And my dad was then all right with me leaving.
So tell us about your military service.
Well, I went in the military, and I was drafted into the Army in October of 1958, and was assigned to Fort Jackson, South Carolina. I never knew that much sand could be that far away from the ocean. And so that's where I did my basic, and then after my basic, I thought, well, surely I've got an accounting degree, surely they'll assign me to some nice advanced training. Well, they decided I was suited to be in the infantry, so they sent me to advanced infantry at Fort Dix, New Jersey. And I was there for a while, and then I was assigned to go overseas to Germany, which was all right with me because nobody was shooting at anybody back in those days. So I went to Germany, and I was there 18 months, had a great time, and then came back to Knoxville.
What did you do when you got back here?
Well, I will tell you that I had made up my mind never to come back to Knoxville. And that by the time I got out of the Army, I was determined never to live anywhere else but Knoxville. So I came back and I went to work for Ernst & Ernst, another accounting firm, and continued to be miserable doing that work. And so, when in doubt, it's always further education. That's what you do. So I'd made up my mind I wanted to be an FBI man. I don't know why I thought I should be in the FBI.
In the FBI?
In the FBI. But back in those days, they were just hiring lawyers and CPAs. So I went to law school with the idea of being an FBI member. That didn't last long.
But you did all right in law school.
I did pretty good. I had the John Green Scholarship for a while, and I did pretty good.
Law review?
Law review, Order of Croix.
Not too shabby for a hometown boy. What did you do after that?
Well, actually, in 1963, the General Assembly had for the first time authorized law clerks for the Supreme Court. And so I was one of the original 5 law clerks assigned to the Supreme Court. Thanks to our mutual friend Don Payne. Don was offered the job first and declined it, and because of that, I got the job, and I appreciated that very much. And I was law clerk to Chief Justice Hamilton Burnett.
Burnett.
That's right.
Explain that.
Well, I asked him once, was it Burnett or Burnett? And he said, Charlie, I can tell you how to remember it. And he had this little saying that went something like this: it's Burnett, darn it, can't you learn it? And so that's how I knew it was Burnett.
So our local American Inn of Court is the Hamilton Burnett
Exactly.
Inn.
I don't think they call themselves that, but that's the way it's pronounced.
But they should, right?
They should, yes.
Somewhere along the way you had the good fortune to meet a lady named Carolyn King.
January or February of 1961, I've been in the Army about 4 or 5 months, and a mutual friend introduced us in front of the snapshot, which you will remember, because it was near the brass rail in Knoxville, and we dated for about, 4 or 5 years.
And you finally talked her into marrying you.
Yeah, we decided to get married, and so we've been married 50 years.
Wow. Children?
3 children. Stephen is 49, and Maria is 47, and Charles is 45. If I get one of them right, I can always get the others right because it's a 2-year gap.
So you either just got them all right or all wrong.
Exactly.
And tell us about your grandchildren.
Well, I now have 6. I had 2 for the longest time. Charles was married, had 2 children, Sophie and Jacob. And then my son, at age 49, decided, actually it was 48, for the first time that he was going to get married. And he married a lady that had 4 children, 3 girls, the oldest of which is 16, and Hudson, the youngest, and Hudson is in the 2nd grade. They live in Brentwood, and Hudson goes to school in Nashville.
I know your family has always been very important to you.
Well, I'm Italian, and family is always important to Italian. In fact, I'm a 2nd generation Italian American. Very proud of that.
Let's go back to the profession. After you clerked for Judge Burnett, then what did you do professionally?
Well, I was with Judge Burnett until June 1, and on June 1, I went to work with a lawyer named Bernard E. Bernstein.
And what year would that have been?
That would have been in 1964. 64 was when I got married. 64 was when I went to work for Bernie.
Tell us about that experience as a young lawyer.
Well, it was really unbelievable experience. Bernie is an extremely bright person, graduate of the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania. Very bright, has a lot of moxie, understands the world, understands life in general, and he overpaid me. I got $100 a week. It's my initial salary, and I wasn't worth that at the time, believe me. And as I've told people frequently, he taught me how to be a lawyer. And he's a wonderful guy, and we continue to be friends to this day.
How long did you all practice together?
About 20 years. Couple little gaps in there that aren't significant particularly, but we were together 20 years. Then for a brief period of time, I thought I was going to be a part owner and a legal counsel to a corporation. That didn't work out, so I left Bernie because they didn't want me to be doing that and practicing law with them, obviously, and I didn't disagree with that. Then I met this lady, Sarah Shepard. Actually, I knew Sarah Shepard, and we formed a partnership, and I guess we're in 3 locations over time.
As the firm grew?
As the firm grew and grew in reputation, thanks a lot to her. And it was a good time, and I think we enjoyed each other.
We were discussing before this interview how some of our favorite times were in the evening, right after 5 o'clock when the phone quit ringing and the staff was gone, and one or the other of us would have some sort of thorny legal problem in a case, and we'd just bounce ideas off each other, and that was just so fulfilling to have a partner you could do that with.
It really was, and I don't know what people do who hang a shingle out, and don't have anybody to talk to. It's so important in the practice of law, because you get involved in these cases, and you need somebody that can step back and say, this is the way you ought to do that.
Your practice was not primarily transactional, but more courtroom work.
Yes.
Correct?
Yes.
Tell us what was meaningful to you about having that kind of a practice.
Well, one of the things I realized very, very early in all of this, because I did a lot of divorce work, as do you, as you did, and also you still do, how people come to you and they have this big problem, be it divorce, being an automobile, and they basically put themselves in your care, and it's a heavy responsibility, but you see it. I mean, the law is very complicated in a lot of respects, and they're desperate. They really are desperate, and it's a huge responsibility. And I always kind of enjoyed that. I also kind of always enjoyed trying to put a client at ease. Look, we're going to get through this. And I don't know how many clients I've told, in divorce cases particularly, 5 years from now, this will be a faint memory for you. You've got to go on with your life and so forth. So I enjoyed that part of it.
Are there any cases in particular that stand out? You probably can't mention the divorce cases, but any special cases in your career?
Well, the Mary Evans case was a case that I will always remember, and it was unique in so many different ways.
Tell us a little bit about that case
I will.
For these youngsters that might not have been around at the time.
Yeah, this case arose out of an incident that occurred at Brushy Mountain State Prison in Petros, Tennessee, which was the place they put all the heavy-duty, really, really bad people. Like James Earl Ray was at Brushy Mountain. So in any event, there were 2 gangs. There was the black gang, which was from Memphis, basically, and then the white gang, which is not geographically centered, but just the white gang. And they sort of took care of their own, but they were constantly at each other. And of course, in prison you can get anything you want. Well, the rumor was that the black gang had a gun. So the white gang decided that they needed to take some preemptive action, and they got a gun. And so one night they went up and they grabbed some guards. They told the guards, we're not going to hurt you, but you're kind of in our way for what we want to do. They then went up to where the black gang was, of course, in their cells, and they killed 3 of them and shot some others, as I recall. Well, there aren't a lot of criminal defense lawyers in Brushy Mountain area in Petros. So the judge called Knoxville lawyers and said, I'm appointing you. I never understood exactly what his authority was, but I guess, a judge in the state of Tennessee can appoint anybody he wants to. So he appointed us, and each person got 2 lawyers, and the reason they got 2 lawyers, the state was going to ask for the death penalty. And all these guys were lifers, and the only thing they really were concerned about was the death penalty. They knew they were going to die in jail, So that was important to them. So in any event, we get, and one of the lawyers was a lady named Mary Evans. And Mary, boy, she was really into this case. I mean, she really devoted all her time to it, and you could tell she was fervent, and how these people, you have to understand what they did and why they did. So, make a long story short, Mary set up an appointment in Oak Ridge with a psychiatrist, trying to build some kind of defense
For her client.
for her client, whose name was Kirk. His last name was Kirk. I can't remember.
Tim Kirk.
Tim Kirk. Thank you, because you know about this case. So anyway, the guards bring Tim down to be psychologically evaluated in Oak Ridge. Make a long story short, Mary Evans is there. Mary passes a gun to Tim, and they take the guards and bind everybody up, and they're out of there. The 2 of them are gone. First word we got, Jerry Becker, my good friend, he was one of the lawyers, said, Mary was taken against her will. I know it. Well, before that night was over, we really knew better. These 2 had left together. They were gone, and stayed gone for a long time. And Kirk was the first case to be tried, and he was tried in absentia, something the Court of Criminal Appeals later said was okay under the circumstances. And we had a great trial judge whose name was, I forgot his name.
Was that Abernathy?
No, I can't. I can't remember. And it'll come to me maybe. So anyway, he tries him in absentia, and they're charged with kidnapping the guards, and they're charged with first-degree murder in the killing of the black members. So the jury hears the case, and the jury comes back. Have you reached a verdict? Yes, we have, Your Honor. On the charge of first-degree murder. There were like 3 charges. How do you find? Find them guilty, Your Honor. And what is the penalty? We assess the penalty at 10 years in prison. On the kidnapping charge, reached a verdict? Yes, we have. Was your verdict guilty of kidnapping? And what is the sentence? Life imprisonment. So at that point, the message was, we don't care what you do to some blacks from Memphis, but you better not mess with our guards. Okay, so then at that point, all the pressure was off us. And I'll tell you a cute story which you may or may not have heard. So we get this call from the judge,
Asbury.
Get the call from Judge Asbury. Judge Asbury says, I want to meet with all of the defense lawyers and with the Attorney General. Okay, when do you want us up in Morgan County? No. We're going to meet in Knoxville. And he arranged for a luncheon place in Knoxville. And actually, it's used to be on the second floor of the Burwell building, right above that new Clancy's place. So we had this private meeting, and we have a nice lunch, which he provided. And after lunch, he says to the Attorney General and to us, "Gentlemen and ladies, this jury has made it very clear that there's not going to be any capital punishment in this case. And your clients are probably more than happy to have a day away from the prison for some hearing in the courthouse, so that they're under no pressure at all. I'm telling you right now, if you think that I'm going to sit there and try all these cases, you're crazy as hell. Now, I'm telling you, Attorney General, and you lawyers, get out there and get these cases settled." It's one of the most unusual experiences I ever had in the practice of law. And we got out, we got it settled. We probably added 30 days to everybody's sentence, and and that was the end. That's a case that really stands out in my mind.
I can see why. Well, let's move forward. June 11, 1992.
Yes, I remember it well.
So do I. Tell us what happened.
Yeah, we were partners then, and what happened was that, according to my wife, let me back up. I've been a sleepwalker all my life. So, according to my wife, she woke up in time to see me dive through a screen going out a window. So then I'm down on the ground. I still have a little scar there from that.
That was a second floor window.
Second floor window, yeah, long fall. And I wake up on the ground. Oh, what's going on? What happened? I had some pain in my chest, but I didn't know what had happened. And I was told what happened. And so, long story made short, went to St. Mary's Hospital, had surgery. Great doctor. And was paralyzed from the breast line down. And so that's what happened that day. And it sort of was a big change in my life.
That was 22 years ago.
Yeah.
After you had surgery, then you had rehabilitation.
Went to Shepherd, what was then called Shepherd Spinal Center in Atlanta, where I was there for about 3.5 months. I went down there, I think, on July the 3rd and got out sometime in October, as I recall. Had to get back by December 1 to keep the medical insurance.
Had to get back to work.
Had
by
to get
December.
back to work, exactly, in order to have the insurance. So I got back to work. But Shepherd Center is such a marvelous place, and they did such a good job. And it's more psychological than it is physical. They taught me how to do things, and I met so many nice people down there, and so many sad stories, quite frankly. The young people, many diving accidents, automobile accidents. It's very, very sad, but I had some good relationships down there.
So you leave a facility in Atlanta that's designed for people with mobility issues.
Correct.
And at that point, you're confined to a wheelchair.
Right. Not confined, I'm in a wheelchair.
Thank you. When you got back to Knoxville 22 years ago, it wasn't quite as ADA compliant as it is now. Is that a fair statement?
It is a fair statement. And it's, there have been things that were difficult. I was, we decided we had a house that, if you include the basement and the 800 square feet on the third floor, actually had 4 levels. I didn't need a 4-level house anymore, believe me. So we, and this is an interesting story to me, we put the house on the market for sale, and it was bought by Jonathan Sowell, who's an ophthalmologist, wife Mary. And here's the kind of people they are. We sell the house to them and we close. They are living in an apartment with two developmentally delayed children. They're living in an apartment. They agree to let us rent the house back from them while we're building a new house. And that's exactly what happened. We broke ground in March and we moved in the new house in August. I mean, we really went at it. One level house, built for me, quite frankly, you know. And so I will always be so grateful to them. What a fine, I mean, how many people would have done that, you know?
What role did your family and your faith play in, I won't call it your recovery, your comeback?
Huge role. We owned a liquor store at the time of my accident, and my oldest son, who was in the hedge fund business, took a leave of absence and came back and ran that for me. I have great kids, Sarah, just great children, and very supportive. And I was determined to live as normal a life as possible. For my benefit, obviously, but for their benefit as well.
And Carolyn's.
And Carolyn, absolutely. And I had this wonderful partner who took all my cases and kept them up to date. I'll always be very thankful for that.
Well, go ahead.
But yeah, you know, the other thing is, I think I had a real epiphany in terms of my faith. You know, I'm a lifelong Catholic, and my first 16 years in college were all in Catholic schools. And I don't know how it happened, but are you familiar with footprints? The little saying about someone who dies and goes to heaven and has this image of walking on the beach and says to God, you know, where were you? Because it had a horrible accident. Where were you when I needed you? And God says that you'll notice there's only one set of footprints on the beach during that period. And why is that? It was because during your times of real trouble, I carried you. And anyway, it's very clumsy the way I've told this story, but it really impressed me, and it probably saved my life spiritually, my accident. I really firmly believe that. And because God didn't push me out that window, but boy, He's really taken good care of me ever since then.
Something very special happened to you in March of '94. I think
Correct.
we actually found a copy of the oath on the internet. March 18, 1994. Tell us about that.
Well, that's an interesting story. I had made it known that I would be interested in getting on the Court of Appeals. And so within 2 days, first phone call I got was from Chancellor William Inman, who was a senior judge and was my very dear friend. And he said, Judge Sanders is going to retire. He hadn't announced it yet, but I'll give you a heads up.